Sometimes I wonder if there even is a God.
Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to Good Questions, No Easy Answers, our first installment. We're going to start with kind of the most basic of all questions. Is there God? Is there really a God? I'm sending out emails. I hope you're getting those. In the first email on this, I quoted from Jan Karen's great novel At Home in Mitford, where Father Tim slips into the sanctuary one night, and there's a man in front of him, surprisingly there. And he's saying, if you're up there, prove it, show me. If you're God, prove it. In the visitor's voice was anger, despair, and an odd hope. I'll never ask you this again, the man said coldly. And then with a fury that chilled Father Tim, he shouted again, are you up there? With what appeared to be utter exhaustion, he put his head in his hands. Father Tim slid into the pew across the aisle and knelt on the worn cushion. He said, you may be asking the wrong question. Startled, the man raised his hand. I believe the question you may want to ask is not, are you up there, but are you down here? To ask, is there a God? That can be an egghead question, just an intellectual exercise. But most people I know, when they ask that question, they've had a kick in the gut. They're at a real crisis in life, and they wonder, like, is there really a God? And what's at stake is, is everything just random? Are we alone down here? Do I matter? Is there any purpose in life? Atheists have the best case, like nobody's seen God. Few people say they've heard God. I don't know. The world's a mess down here. We're a mess inside. The atheists have the best case. How are you going to prove that there's a God? And there are a lot of books now about atheism. They're bestsellers in our bookstores. Atheism it's a popular thing. The beauty of the questioning, I think, is great. I have a friend, he doesn't believe in God, and he's always hammering me with hard questions, and I love it. Because when he asks questions, it helps me dispel illusions that I have about God. If I said, oh, clearly there's a God because I'm always protected from harm. Well, give it some time, right? That's not going to work. So is there a God? We got to think about what God is and what God isn't. God's not, this big sugar daddy in the sky. God's not a genie that grants wishes. God's not a protective bubble, clearly. You can't say God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. The world's a mess, right? We know this. God's not, the smiter doing these things. I have to say, whether I believe in God or not, I'm impressed when other people believe in God under considerable duress. You can say there are no atheists in foxholes, but some people, they have every good reason to say there just can't be a God. I think about a poem that was written on the wall of a cellar in Germany during World War II, where a Jewish person was hiding out. And the poem, it's a lovely poem of belief in God. And my friend Mark Miller, I have a podcast with him this week. I hope you listen to the podcast. Wrote a song about this. I asked our choir to sing this for us. So I don't know about you, I am impressed by those who are enduring horrors who still believe in God, still trust in God, although many don't. I'd love to come up with proofs for God. Like here we prove God exists. I know when I was in college, I started reading some of these in a philosophy class. When I went to seminary, some theologians attempted proofs of God. And you try things like, everything had to get here somehow. What was the first mover of all the things that have moved since then? How did creation come to be? It's kind of a proof of God. We could ask a question like the order. To me, this is impressive, the order of things. If the charge on an electron were like 2% different, or if the force of gravity were 1% different from what it is, human life wouldn't exist. Right, so all these small variables in creation have come together to make this beautiful world that we know. And not just a beautiful world that we know, but there are people in it like you and me. We have this urge for transcendence. We ask questions like, is there more? Is there a God? Is there purpose? Doesn't seem like the kind of thing that would have evolved, because that creates a lot of agony in you, doesn't it? We do have these yearnings. We want more. When somebody dies, it's hard to imagine that they're gone. It's hard to imagine that we'll be gone. Or these little indicators that there's something beyond. The truth is, though, you can't lock down somebody that doesn't believe in God. I will convince you, and you'll have no choice but to accept my logic. That's just not a thing. Stephen Hawking, years ago, came out with a new book called The Theory of Everything. Stephen Hawking, he was so brilliant, right? And in this, he said, you can explain all that there is in the universe without recourse to God or any higher power. Somebody came to me and said, you need to answer Stephen Hawking. Like, yeah, I'm going to respond and talk brilliant Stephen Hawking out of this. I actually think God likes it that you can't definitively prove God so that people have to believe. There's a choice in it. It's about love. After all, you can't make somebody love you. You can't make somebody know you, right? There's a choice that's involved in that. It's love. It can't be forced. If I wanted to persuade somebody there's a God, I think about those things like the order that's in the universe. I think also a lot about beauty. It's the meaning. Where's beauty? Where does that come from? Why do we appreciate beauty? Why are we so moved by beauty? I have a theologian friend, did a podcast with her back during the pandemic, named Wendy Farley. It's a whole book about beauty that she wrote recently. She says, beauty is the threshold to the divine. Like, if you want to think about God and know about God, start with beauty wherever you see it. And beauty's not movie stars and sunsets. Beauty's, as she puts it, it might be a dog wallowing on his back, or kids playing on a trampoline or a cloud, or an old woman who's sewing, looking out the window at a tree that's growing. C.S. Lewis, the great children's writer, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, he wrote a lot of great Christian books. He wrote this: if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. That convinced C.S. Lewis, right? He'd been an atheist and he converted to be a believer. And a lot of people who were atheists who've converted to be believers. Francis Collins, the director of the Human Genome Project. Google atheists who converted to Christianity. All kinds of people that are in there. Although as soon as I say that, I bet there are more people who have converted from being Christians to becoming atheists. I give up. I'm an agnostic now. It goes both ways. I have two friends. I used to be in a book club with them who are unbelievers. They don't believe in God. One, he's just hostile. He's just always asking questions, always wants to argue with me. I love that because, again, he helps me think about my faith more thoroughly. So it's not just kind of thin, insubstantial. So I appreciate that. I love him. The other friend is more interesting to me. He says, I'm just tone deaf when it comes to matters of faith. He's not hostile, he's just tone deaf. It just doesn't register with him. Charles Darwin, he was married to a very pious wife, but he said, when it comes to matters of faith, I am colorblind. I like those images. So there's no hostility toward the faith. It's just there are a lot of people that just don't get it. You know them, and I know them. I want to say this. If we believe in God, we're not threatened by that or troubled by that. Somehow God created a world where there are going to be some people that don't get God. And that's okay. And sometimes we don't get God. But the point of the series is to try to think thoroughly about God and dispel some of our illusions and so on. So we're not anxious for that. We do want to get past, God is Santa Claus, shows up once in a while, bringing us gifts when we need it. God protecting us. There are a lot of problems in the world. We're going to continue to raise questions. What does it mean to believe? That's going to be our next session. To say, do I believe in God? What's that? And then we're going to move on to what's God like? We've touched on that some today. We're going to go further into that. We're going to ask, why is the Bible so hard? And then move on to those questions like, why do bad things happen? Why is there evil in the world? Does God answer prayer? So many things. Thank you for joining us for Good Questions, No Easy Answers.